let's have a look at this exercise now. So what do we have here? We have a country with a perfectly competitive market for education. Now we have the price of education P, which is equal to the cost of education. It depends on the quality, so this is the relationship between them. We have the utility of one family, which depends on the goods that the family is consuming and the education of their child. Okay, so in question 26, a family with an income of 1200 euros chooses optimally this amount of quality. Okay, so we have here the data. Now what would be a first step to do? We could rewrite the utility function, because the utility function depends on this square root of the goods, right? Square root of g, and g at the same time is equal to y minus 3q. So with this in mind, with this substitution, we could do something. So let's solve it over here like that. The utility will be equal to square root of y minus 3q, because that's the same as g, so we will have y minus 3q plus, and over here we'll have square root of q, so square root of q. Now what do we see here? We see the relationship between utility and the quality of education, right? And we have this square root. Now if we show it on a graph, how does it look like? Well, on a graph that looks something like that. It would look like a concave function. So utility and quality of education, there's going to be diminishing returns, which makes intuitive sense. So it will be something like that. The utility will reach a maximum point at a certain level of quality of education, because there's only so much we can demand from an education. Beyond a certain point, the quality, the additional quality of the education doesn't increase our utility anymore, and we want to hit that optimal amount. We want to hit that maximum utility. Now, how do we do so? We will differentiate utility with respect to the quality of education, utility derivative with respect to q, and we wanna make it equal to 0, because the slope, the derivative at that point, will be flat, will be 0. Now, how do we differentiate that? Well, we take the derivative of every term. So we differentiate the first term, square root of y minus 3q derivative with respect to the quality, plus square root of q derivative with respect to quality. Square root of q derivative with respect to quality is equal to 0. Okay, now let's solve it. What do we have here? We can use the chain rule, because we have an expression of the quality, so we have to keep that in mind. We'll have 1 over 2 times the square root of y minus 3q multiplied with the derivative of the chain, which will be y minus 3q derivative with respect to q, plus we're differentiating the square root of the quality with respect to q, which is 1 over 2 square root of q equals to 0. Okay, let's keep going, see what works out over here. 1 over 2 square root of y minus 3q multiplied with, now what is the derivative of y minus 3q? Well, we will have only the constant minus 3. That will be the derivative left from here. So times minus 3 plus 1 over 2 square root of q equals to 0. Now let's take this term on the other side. So minus 3 over 2 square root of y minus 3q to the other side becomes positive, right? It will become positive, and what do we have now? We will have the following. We'll have 1 over 2 square root of q equals to 3 divided by 2 times square root of y minus 3q. Okay, 2 and 2 we can cancel out. So 2 and 2 we can cancel out like that. Now what are we left with? We're left with the following. We're left with 1 divided by square root of q equals to 3 divided by square root of y minus 3q. Now to get rid of the square root, we will take the power of 2 of both sides, because it's an equation, right? This is an equation, so we can do so. We can take the power of 2 here and there. Now if we raise both sides to the power of 2, what do we get? 1 square is just 1, divided by square root of q to the power of 2 is q, equals to 3 to the power of 2 is 9, divided by square root of y minus 3q to the power of 2, that's just y minus 3q. Okay, so what do we do next? What do we do next? We can do a cross multiplication. We can do a cross multiplication over here. Let's see what we're left with. 1 times y minus 3q is y minus 3q equals to 9 times q, which is 9q. Okay, now what we said is this, by the way, y equals to 12q. So y equals to 12q, and we want to know whether this holds true for an income of 1200 euros. So let's see, when the income is 1200 euros, what's going to be the quality of education that the family wants? Well, 1200 euros is equal to 12 multiplied with q. If we divide both sides by 12, we can see that the optimal quality of education for that family will be equal to 100, and that is what the answer key tells us. So the answer is true and we are done.